So let's get started. So I'm going to give you a quick introduction to Amber tonight, who's going to be speaking. And the topic of her speech tonight is how to deal with difficult stakeholders. Now, a bit about Amber. She is a diversely skilled professional, specializing in all aspects of leadership, communication, and stakeholder management. She's a master professional coach, PM thought leader, speaker, and teacher. She possesses a unique aptitude for leading complex conversations and works hard to create and sustain productive dialogue through team building exercises, positive motivation, and her own contagious enthusiasm. Now, with tangible credentials and over 30 years of experience in both profit and non-profit environments, she's committed to learning and growing while continuing to practice her profession. Amber excels as an empathetic visionary, establishing creative ways forward in complicated multiple stakeholder communities, often referred to as an agent of change with wide-ranging communication and service experience. Her passion continues to drive innovation in her work. She's eager to share both her success and failure in benefits to others, reflected in her favorite quote, do the best you can until you know better. Then when you know better, do better. And that quote is by Maya Angelou. The stakeholders who work alongside Amber appreciate her honesty, transparency, unique insights, and tangible advice for immediate use. She currently serves as Chief Visionary Officer of Rogers Society, President of PMI Vancouver Island, Board Chair of the Council of Certification and Volunteer Administration, Board Secretary for Greater Victoria, Acting Together, and Executive Educator for Schulich School of Business, York University, University of Winnipeg, University of Saskatchewan, and University of Victoria. Those are great credentials, Amber. And as I mentioned, what you'll be talking about is dealing with the difficult stakeholders. I'm going to pass it over to you, Amber, to get started with tonight's topic. So we're really eager to hear a bit more about what you'll be teaching us.
Thank you. Thank you so much. Listen, guys, I want you to understand how intimidating it is to speak to a group of amazing professionals that I have just sat in this chair and witnessed articulation and conscientious behavior with each other, funny anecdotes, and at the same time, just such a high level of professionalism. So, man, do I have my work cut out for me. But I'm so honored to be with you again, actually. This is my second time sharing with you, and it's such an honor, so I'm grateful. I don't want to spend too much time talking about me because you heard lots, but I will say that I come to you right now in this moment from the Wasanik and Lekwungen territories on Vancouver Island. I am honored to work, to live, and to play on these territories. And I have to tell you, as we share tonight a little bit about stakeholder management and how to deal with difficult ones, I want you to know that I am a difficult stakeholder when it comes to my relationship to colonialism and to how I view Indigenous peoples in Canada. And this is a journey for me as a professional. I have learned so much, as I believe many of us as Canadians have in the last few years. And my difficulty as a stakeholder is an important lesson for me to recognize that what we talk about tonight is actually also how I need to be held as a stakeholder in my journey of learning and understanding what I did not know. That being said, I want to also say that the grace with which I have received from the local Indigenous peoples is, I'm speechless. I am not deserving of the grace that they give me in my learning journey. So I am humbled as I share with you on their territory. I'm grateful to be here. I am exactly the opposite end of Canada as most of you are from, but I do want to say that I was born in North York General Hospital. So Purple Smokestack, although it probably doesn't have a smokestack anymore. Purple Smokestack off the 401. That is where I was born and raised, and I have been in British Columbia now for about 18 years. We live in an amazing country, but we have much work to do. So I want to share with you this evening just a little bit of my own experience in dealing with stakeholders, because life is filled with stakeholders. As I mentioned, I'm a poor one myself in a lot of areas of my life. But certainly as project management professionals, we have much that we can equip ourselves with. We can do better, like my favorite quote, which is definitely that once we know better, it's not that just that we should do better, it's that I believe we're called to do better, particularly as project management professionals. So I'm going to share my screen. I think I want to make some assumptions that we all understand what stakeholder means, but I also want to define it before we launch into this together. A stakeholder is defined as a person entrusted with a stake of betters, one who has a stake in an enterprise, or one who's involved or affected by a course of action. All of those three encompass what we define as a stakeholder. And in project management, we know that everyone and anyone is a stakeholder. So I want you to ask yourself in your mind, to help prime the pump of your ability to listen and lean into what I share. Who are your stakeholders? And I want you to keep in mind that how you define stakeholders, the moment that I ask the question, they're all right answers. So you could be sitting right now at home, you likely are. You could be viewing a spouse, a friend, a partner, a child. These obviously are your stakeholders right now in this moment. But think about the types of people that you have in your life that are stakeholders, and capture one or two of them, and let's think on those as we go together through what I want to highlight as only some of the tips that I have learned the hard way, I will say. So ask yourself, with this one or two stakeholders you have floating in that, ethereal bubble over your head, in your mind, what power do those stakeholders have over you? And what politics are those stakeholders dealing with? So I can think about mine right now, and I think about, I have a child still living at home. They're on the verge of leaving, but they're still under my roof. And they have tremendous power over me as a parent. And they have a lot of politics that they're dealing with. The politics of their own personal emotions. They're wanting to assert themselves over their parental connection. And at the same time, they have their finger on my emotions and my heart, because of course, they're my child. So the power and politics in my relationship with my child stakeholder, tremendous. And it greatly influences how I create space for them and how they engage with me. You may have children, but I know you have people in your life, whether they're at work, whether they're at home. These people are your stakeholders, and these stakeholders have power and they have politics at play as they navigate you and their own life at the same time. And this is no different in project management, because 100%, we love data, right? We're project managers. 100% of stakeholders have politics and power of their own at play all the time. And what type of power in politics? Home. Their home life is always at play. Their life, their emotions, the way they feel, the other connections and relationships they have, that's at play 100% of the time. And their work, their passion perhaps, or their job, or their projects, however those individuals define it, their work is at play in giving them power in politics that they have to manage at all times. And of course, we as project management professionals have to manage them. And I know PMI decided to drop the management term a few years ago in the PMBOK 6 iteration. Thank you, PMI, but let's face it, engagement is necessary, but there is a management element that we also still have to apply. And we have to figure out when to do one and when to do the other. There's 3 types of expert judgment that I propose we need to use when dealing with stakeholders. I'm not going to say difficult, because I think, quite honestly, all of them can be difficult. In fact, the ones you decide are not going to be difficult, if you're anything like me, you often have learned the hard way that they can change. They can become difficult at any point, and greatly influenced by the power and the politics of their life, their home, and their work that they bring to the table. So, expert judgment as project managers, we have to use it, but there are 3 types that I think we need to take into consideration. The first one is your aptitude, your IQ, your ability to size up and understand the situation from a professional, mental, logical capacity. That's a huge type of expert judgment that you have to use when dealing with stakeholders. And you also have to deal with the IQ of others, your stakeholders, their ability to agree or not agree with your logic and your mindset and your intelligence in the situation. But there is a third, my friends, and the third is perhaps the most important expert judgment to apply when dealing with stakeholders, and that is your emotional intelligence. Now, I would love to say to you that the emotional intelligence of your stakeholders is irrelevant, and you only have to deal with your own emotional intelligence. But in reality, their EQ factors in as well. So I guess technically, there's 4 types of expert judgment that you have to balance as you manage and engage in stakeholder relationships. What do I mean when I say emotional intelligence? I mean self-awareness. I mean, do you know who you are and how you present emotionally and relationally to others? That self-awareness is the most important type of intelligence in managing stakeholders. And the reason is because of 2 slides ago, which was that there are power and politics at play at all times, both for you and also for the stakeholders you're engaging with. And that power and politic game can only actually be measured and be balanced by applying social skills, self-awareness, emotional intelligence, logic and reason. It has a role, but the expert judgment and the most successful project managers learn how to ratchet up their EQ in times of managing stakeholders, specifically when they're difficult. Because 100%, there's that data again we love, 100% of stakeholders are unique. You're not going to get the identical stakeholder. In fact, you're not even going to get the same stakeholder on the next project if it's the same person, because the way they present in the next project may be completely different than the way they presented in the current project you're in. So that uniqueness is a huge moving target, because 100% of stakeholders are human. Not only are we, in learning to manage and engage them, human, and our humanity greatly affects how we feel about the work we need to do, but they are human as well. And when we lose sight of their humanity, we lose touch with what we have as leverage, to absolutely impact and influence them in the way that delivers value to the project. And that's what we want to do. We want to be focused on value delivery, because that's where we measure project success. And perhaps maybe we didn't think about it that way for the last 50 years, but we are learning that the value that's brought to the project and to the stakeholders is really the true measurement, which means some projects run over, some cost more than we thought. But if the value is delivered, there's success there. There's success to be found. So what forms of power do stakeholders possess? Well, over my career, I have a kind of isolated a few areas, and one is voting power. Certainly they have the ability to vote you in or out of your position, whether that's project manager, project coordinator, team leader, team member, or simply an accessory to the project, whatever your role is. They have voting power as stakeholders. Sometimes the vote isn't that you can get fired, but the vote is definitely that they can make your life difficult. They also have economic power. And generally in our project management, stakeholders possess economic influence and power, often because the money comes from them. So if you're dealing with a sponsor or in procurement, we see this. Economic power. Then we have political power. That's, kind of what I was talking about, in that all of us have power in politics at play. It could be their own personal politics, but it also could be the relationship between their organization and yours. There's so much politics going on, and it could be the business side of politics, but it could also be the personal side. That, I've got history with that person. I've got issues with them from other times. All of that political kind of posturing can come into play. And then legal power. They absolutely can have legal power because, of course, they have interest. They have stake in what we're doing. And that can transfer into legal power. And then informational. This one's my favorite. And I say favorite because I don't know about you, but if you've ever been on a project where the stakeholder has decided that there is information that they don't think you need, and in reality, if you had known it earlier, you could have delivered value to them much better. Stakeholders have information that we need, and we need to find effective ways to farm that information out of them, because some of them aren't even aware that they're holding it back. So these are sort of the most common areas that I think they hold power, particularly in our projects. And if we ask ourselves, well, what do the stakeholders actually want? I think they want their needs met. That's that value delivery. Whatever they've decided they need, they want you to meet those needs. The project is probably it exists to meet their needs, especially if they were the sponsor. They also want their organization's needs met. So if you applied this in a personal environment and saw this as, okay, it's not an organization, it's a family. Families still want the family's needs met as stakeholders. So it's not just about them, but it's also about the others that they represent that want their needs met. They ultimately want to trust the people that they're sharing time and space with. They do want to trust you as a project manager. That's natural as humans. We do want to trust. Problem is, some of us have different ways that we get there. And they do want to be impressed. Never met a stakeholder yet that I didn't recognize wanted to be proud of the work that they have stake in, wanted to take perhaps responsibility for success, but definitely want bragging rights to whatever the accomplishments are, whatever the value that's being generated is. And they really want their backs covered. Stakeholders want to know that their stake in the project, their stake in the environment that you're in with them is being protected. So what does that mean as a project manager? Well, we have to do a lot of work. So a couple of tips before I give you my 6 big tips for how to deal with difficult stakeholders. But I want to highlight 3 things, 3 core areas of work that we as project managers can do. Build an excellent stakeholder register, an excellent one, not an average one, not a mediocre one. Build an excellent one that reflects their power, their politics, their uniqueness, and most of all, bold letters, their humanity. Do you know I've been teaching stakeholder management for years, and so very rarely, I teach it in the master's program, so very rarely do I meet people who build beautiful, excellent stakeholder registers. They think it's an inferior document. I'm telling you, my friends, this is where the gold is. So build a great register. It's not just name and contact info. It's also what's their power? What's their influence? What are their unique interests? What kind of involvement do they have or do they want? Make sure you're capturing that, and then definitely capture their idiosyncrasies. Now, I will say this, I'm at my desk and I have a drawer in my desk right here, and it has a lock. And in this top drawer, sometimes I have my little idiosyncrasy list on my stakeholders in my top drawer, locked behind the drawer itself. I choose to do that because there are so many idiosyncrasies you don't want to publish in your project documentation. But you, as a project manager or as a human, you need to be empowered by knowing your stakeholders and what little idiosyncrasies they have, not to leverage it to their disadvantage. No, to leverage it so that you can capitalize on those idiosyncrasies, right down to the way they take their coffee. Sometimes that's really important to know, because remember, 100% of stakeholders are human. That's right. And humans want to be cared for, and they want to trust you. And trust measures sometimes come in the form of delivering value in the form of coffee, the way they like it. So make sure you build an excellent stakeholder register. Second thing, an agile communication plan. And what do I mean? I don't mean you have to go back to school and become an agile expert. I simply mean agile as the way the word is defined, which is to remain able to make change really quickly. We need agility in our communication plans, and we need that strategy because that will invite stakeholders themselves to add value to the project and to the work. And brace yourself. I'm like, hold on to your hats. This means you're gonna have to bring your stakeholders in to the communication planning. You're gonna have to ask them how they want to be informed and what they need to know. You need to actually engage with them. And I know for some people, we think, oh, can't we just make a communication plan and just execute? I'm like, you can, but then your stakeholders will be difficult and you'll really potentially struggle to know how to do good work for them. So ask yourself in your plan, who's going to get the information? What are we going to give them? How are they going to get it? What makes sense to them in their uniqueness and with their idiosyncrasies and influence factored in? When could, would, or should they get it? You know, decide with you and your team and think about what you know of them. Customize the plan to communicate for success. And then finally, who's it going to come from? Friends, not all of you are good communicators in your project stakeholder relationships. I am not the communicator you send to certain stakeholders because I am bull in a china shop. I am bold, I am enthusiastic, and there are some stakeholders who don't trust that. I'm hopeful that none of them are you this evening, but you have to be conscious of who is going to share the message from the team the best, so that that stakeholder will have the ears to hear. There's nothing wrong with thinking about that. This is called leveraging gifts and skills on your team, not alienating people who can really make a difference. You may have someone on your team right now who doesn't do much of the communicating, but who should, because they have huge skills in this area. So I want to watch a really quick clip. I did optimize this for sound, but as I press play, if there's any challenge with the sound, please let me know. Someone just come off mute. And this is Simon Sinek. I will warn you, there is an expletive used, but I have to tell you, I made the judgment call that it was still worth hearing. So please guard your ears. if you're sensitive, and be warned. But I do believe that this is really important. This is how you build trust with your stakeholders. Whoops, and there it went away. Let's see if I can get it to play. Let me see.
I'm really interested in understanding the military concept, and I've listened to you a number of times describe that, and I've seen it in programs and shows. The military, how it shapes minds to a point where that individual will put the most precious thing, their life, on the line for their partner. How can we create that in our organizations, not in the time frame of years, but in the time frame of weeks and months, like the military?
Yeah. So let's answer those questions in reverse. So one of the things that I have deep admiration for the military, and the admiration I have for the military is the exact same love and admiration I have for artists, is because they both undertook their paths knowing that they weren't going to get rich, and felt like it was a calling, and were willing to sacrifice to advance this thing, whatever it is, and be a part of something. So to me, it's the same love. And the thing that I noticed immediately when I started hanging out with folks in uniform is you and I have colleagues and coworkers. They have brothers and sisters. They literally refer to the people they work with as brothers and sisters. And the relationship is one of brother and sister, which is they may fight, but you try and attack my brother or sister, you got to go through me. They love each other. Love is the word they will use. The Marine Corps calls them the intangibles, right? That what makes the Marine Corps strong are the intangibles. What they mean is empathy, love, devotion, these mushy words. And you're asking me a question like, how do we do it in weeks and months? These are human beings we're talking about, right? So that's like asking me, can I give you advice so that you can fall in love in a matter of weeks, instead of having to do this whole like getting to know them, being vulnerable. I got no app for that. It's a slow, ploddy process. Sometimes you get lucky and you have a meeting of the minds and you have shared values and it goes a little quicker, but even though we get really excited and we jump in the relationship, 3 months later we're like, what was I thinking? Right? There is no way to speed up. It takes more than a week, but if you've been doing something for 7 years and you don't love it, maybe it's wrong, right? I just don't know where it happens. So what I do know is that the way you build trust inside an organization is the exact same way you fall in love, right? Which is you devote yourself to the care of another human being, sometimes at the sacrifice of your own interests. It means when the person you love comes home from work and they said, I had a terrible day, and you had an amazing day, you don't say a word about your amazing day at all. And you sit there and listen with love and empathy to their horrible day, as opposed to waiting for your turn to speak. You know, it means that you wake up in the morning and you say good morning to them before you check your phone. It's little things. It means you learn to listen and make them, and listening is real easy. It means you make the other person feel heard. So if you can go learn all of those things on how to make a friend and how to fall in love, now go do all of those things at work. That when somebody walks into your office and goes, oh, fuck my day. You go, what's happening? And you listen so they feel heard. Don't give them advice. Don't fix anything. Just listen, right? When they tell you how awful it is, say, that sucks, tell me more, right? It's the same thing. It's the exact same thing. And I promise you, you will build those relationships where you will fall in love with the people you work with. And you will call them brothers and you will call them sisters, and they will say the same of you. So that's how you do that. And by the way, the military doesn't do it in 13 weeks. What they do is they create a foundation for it in 13 weeks. But it takes time for those relationships to truly form.
So it's not easily done. It's not a switch like Simon suggested. But what I would encourage you to think about is you find out enough about your stakeholders so that you can listen to them, so that you can create moments where they will lean toward you to share what their needs are, because they trust you, because you know them. Now, you don't have to fall in love with them, but I will say, in all of my 30 years of experience, I have never met a stakeholder that I didn't have to find a way to like. I'll say that again. I've never met a stakeholder that I didn't have to find a way to like. That means I have to relegate my ego and my attitude towards how they might be difficult for me, to see through that and to recognize their value, what they contribute, what they bring in power and influence to the project, so that I may create space for them. And when you learn to do this, you end up liking your stakeholders, even the difficult ones, because you have the opportunity to be trusted. And let me share, they better trust you. Priority one is trust in your stakeholder relationships, and they had better trust you. And how are you trustworthy? You care. You don't use your IQ only, you use your EQ as well. You leverage your ability to understand them the best and to hear them and allow them to feel heard. And that will prime them to take from you what's necessary in project management. And as you know, a lot of what's necessary is risk. We have a lot of risks in project management, risks in life. So my third piece of advice, build an excellent register, keep an agile communication plan at play, manage stakeholder risk, because it needs to go beyond the trust. They got to trust you, but they need to know that you are their advocate. You need to exceed their needs. That doesn't mean gold plating. That simply means that personally they feel that you are making the grade, that you are going beyond and making sure that they feel understood. You need to invite them to be key players. Like I was saying back there, you've got to have questions and engagement. You can't just communicate out to a stakeholder and hope they get it. You need to ensure, did you get it? And be in relationship with them. That agility isn't necessary, because you need to treat every stakeholder as important, because you never know when one of them is going to become more difficult than you anticipated. That's also on your risk, right? And then show them all consideration. Not all stakeholders are deserving by any means of your trust or your like. But what we know as professionals is, if we can establish some of these base approaches to managing people and managing stakeholders, what happens very often is even those who really are always difficult, we still find ways to manage them or have them respect us for the position we hold. It might even be that they don't like you, but they can see and witness you with other stakeholders, and they have respect for that. Sometimes that's the best you can get when it comes to managing a difficult one. So how do we handle the difficult ones? Well, I will say I have lots of thoughts about this, but I want to leave you with 6 of the highlights. And encourage you that all of these are actions that you have to take. They're all actions. So 6 steps. First step, and there's the foot. See, the foot is there to remind you got to act. Be responsive. What does that mean? Sometimes, my friends, it means you do have to answer the telephone, and at a time that's inconvenient for you. Now, you get to decide using your IQ and your EQ as to which moments are the most critical, but you do have to be prepared to be responsive. That doesn't mean that you let a stakeholder walk all over you. You still have your standards, but you do need to make sure that they feel that they have your ear. That responsiveness can look a bunch of different ways. I have a good friend who was involved in a huge project here in Victoria that went horribly wrong, and he was brought in to fix it. He was the project management fixer. And he knew, because of the critical state the project was in, he had to answer the phone at 3 a.m. And he told his spouse at the time, he said, I'm sorry, but I'm new to this project, and I know if I invest 2 weeks of being incredibly responsive, it will pay dividends to how I build trust with my stakeholders. And you know what? That's exactly what happened. The 3 a.m. phone calls went away after they began to trust that he would answer their calls. And then once there was trust, he could establish different ground rules. So sometimes you're going to have to be responsive. Step 2, be humble. My friends, I have got an ego the size of Everest. And the only amount of success that I have today is from my ability to relegate it. That doesn't mean I still don't have it. It just simply means that I am in charge of my ego, and I work very hard to practice humility. When I am humble with my stakeholders, when I listen more and speak less, they begin to trust me quicker. And so in humility, I approach them. In humility, I ask them. I don't tell them. And I'm a fierce, feisty woman. My nickname is the feisty PM, and I am all red hair all the time. So this is hard for me. But I have learned that the respect factor, the trust factor is exponential when I take a humble approach. I apologize immediately if I have aggravated a stakeholder, and I don't explain that I didn't mean it. I simply say, I'm so sorry. And then I'm quiet. I let the dust settle. And it nearly kills me on the inside, but I have learned to cultivate this. It's made me a better person, I have to say. And it is not easy, but it is part of exercising that EQ. Step 3, try to and understand. Try to put your thoughts and perspective into their shoes and do it. Understand where they're coming from. If you're dealing with a difficult stakeholder and they are losing their mind, stop yourself and think, what would I do if I were them? And then tell them that. Articulate to them, if I were in your position, understand completely. Can you help me figure out how you and I can come to terms? Because I can see your side. This is huge language to do with stakeholders, especially when they're difficult ones. So try to and understand them. 4, demonstrate that you've heard them. Give them quick wins as much as possible. Look for ways to leverage their value deliveries early on, and that will absolutely inspire their respect for you and their trust for you. And make sure that they know that you're listening to them. And the best way to do that is to deliver value. If they say they want something, find a way to deliver it, and not 100% of it. Do the best you can, but communicate that. Communicate, I know you wanted this. This is the most that we can give you, but we really want you to celebrate the success with us because we had so many constraints that made it unrealistic to give you 100%. Those conversations will work. I believe me when I say that, especially if you've been honest and earnest up until then. 5, be really open about your constraints. Like I just said, we can't give them everything. So don't promise. Be honest. Tell them literally what your constraints are. Sometimes stakeholders, when they understand that, they lift those constraints. Surprisingly, they won't know to lift them for you unless you share with them you have them. And then finally, last step, be realistic. You are not a miracle worker. None of us are. We are only human, and so are they. So be honest about where you're at. Tell the truth. The truth really will set you free. And when you know better of the project, then do better. And that means be realistic about where you're at. These 6 steps will get you much further to engaging with difficult stakeholders in a way that helps you sleep at night. So with that, I'm going to wrap it up. I thank you so much for the privilege of being here with you. It's absolutely an honor. Like I said, you intimidate a speaker, and I'm grateful for that because it pushes me to be better. And yeah, thank you so much for this time. I really appreciate it.